Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Way That I See It. My name is Lucy Superfox, and this is my podcast. So whether you are watching on YouTube, whether you are listening on Apple, Spotify, or some other platform, thank you for coming back. Thank you for always listening. Feel free to let me know what you thought, drop a comment below, or reach out to me on one of my social media platforms and let me know if there's anything you would love me to riff on, talk about, or share more of my story on. I'm just going to move my microphone, so apologies for any interference. You would like me to talk more about. So today I wanted to talk about what you're making it mean. Meanings is something that's been a big topic of conversation in my world for a little while now. I realized a couple of months ago that I was making things mean something different from what the actual state of reality was. So let me give you an example. We have so many universal meanings for things. If someone gets married, we're like, that's the universal meaning of love and happiness. Someone has a baby, we think the same thing. Somebody gets divorced or somebody dies, we think it's sad, or we think it's awful, or we think it's terrible, right? There's some universal meanings. But actually, in some instances, those things don't necessarily mean the universal meaning that we give them. Now, an example could be a divorce could be the most healthy thing for a couple, and marriage could be a terrible idea for people that shouldn't be together. And so what we sometimes have to remember is just because society or culture has given something a meaning doesn't mean that has to be true for us. Now, one of the biggest things where this came up in my life was all to do with numbers. So whether it's numbers on the scale, numbers in your bank account, numbers on a set of statistics that you follow for your business, number of sales, number of leads, whatever kind of metrics you use, and every single person is different, right? Whether it's targets at work, whether it's KPI indicators, like whatever it is that you're held accountable to in terms of numbers to measure and track your sales, your business growth, or your performance at work, what often happens is we make those numbers mean more than they actually do. So we might make a number on the scale mean that we can't be happy unless we're 55 kilos, or we can't be happy until there's 5 figures in the savings, or we can't be happy until. And that is because we have chosen to give that number a meaning beyond our self-worth. So let me explain that. So what we often do is say that our happiness, our success, our fulfillment, our worthiness, our entitlement only comes as a result of a financial or numerical metric, like the scales, the bank account, the statistics, right? That we say, I'll be worthy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be successful when we see that metric in that place. Now, here's the thing. What we then do is we measure our self-worth and our capabilities and our how good we are at what we do based on those numbers. Now, there's nothing to say that numbers aren't a useful metric, right? They are. They measure effort, they measure performance, they measure results. Those results don't always necessarily correlate with effort. Effort is subjective, right? Effort is never ending. It's not a linear path, but when you look at something like results, it's a very objective metric. And so trying to measure something that's emotional, feeling based, by a metric just doesn't make any sense, but yet we do it. We measure our self-worth based on numbers, whether it's how much money we earn, how much we weigh, what our sales targets are at work. Like, we seem to measure our self-worth and what we believe about ourselves based on those numbers. Now, by doing that, what you're doing is sending yourself into a downward spiral of negativity, limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, bad stories. You're then putting yourself in a vibration and energy of negativity, of lack. And then what happens is you attract more of it into your life. So then you become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you're like, oh my God, see, I was right. Okay. And that is all because you chose to put more meaning in the numbers than meaning in your actual work, or meaning in the actual workout, or meaning in eating a healthy meal, or the meaning in why you go to the gym in the first place, or the meaning in why you started the business, or the meaning in the fact that you love your job. We hold ourselves so accountable to numbers that we forget about why we do something. And the challenge comes when we decide that our self-worth or our worthiness is dictated by these numbers, because often what happens is, by dictating by these numbers, if these numbers aren't in the direction we want them to go, regardless of whether it's bank account, business, or scales, right, we then change and modify our behavior based on what those numbers say. Because we allow those numbers to mean something well beyond they do, which in turn then changes behavior. By changing behavior, then what happens is we change the result in action, and normally it's in the opposite direction of the thing that we want. Now, what we have to realize is this, and something that I realized, is that my self-worth is a completely separate subject like a completely separate subject from the numbers in my bank account, the numbers on the scale, and the numbers in my business dashboard, and the number of sales I made, the number of people on my email list, the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of engagements, the number of reel views, the number of people that showed up to an event. It doesn't fucking matter, right? I have recognized and realized that my self-worth is intrinsic, and my self-worth is certain. It's a never ending, it's a never disputable, it just is, right? My self-worth is, we're all born fucking worthy. It's just the stories and beliefs we tell ourselves along the way, or that are told to us by people that we respect and care about and love and look up to, that allow us to decide otherwise. Your self-worth is a completely separate thing from the numbers you're using to measure your life. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm so triggered by numbers, but what I'm learning to do is separate the two things. Us women are so freaking emotional. We internalize and process everything well beyond where it needs to go. And ultimately, I look at my partner Josh sometimes and other men in my life who are successful in business and goals, and they are so objective. They don't ever once recognize, they don't have that. I'm not saying they don't ever doubt their self-worth and belief, but they see things much more black and white. And honestly, it's so inspiring to watch, because what they do is they don't choose all these outside metrics to measure their internal self-worth. And so for me, one of the challenges and one of the things that I've really worked on in the last 3 to 6 months is doing that, is changing the meaning I am giving to things. So when something happens in my life, or something happens in an event, or Josh and I have a conversation and I decide that means something, I ask myself, is that what I'm making it mean, or is that what it really means? So there's a question for you. When you think of something makes you feel crappy, makes you feel shit, makes you doubt yourself, I want you to ask yourself this question: what am I making this mean? Now, the reason we give things meanings, right, outside of the universal meanings, or outside of what we believe to be true, so outside of the factual objectives, shall we say, or the metrics, why do we give things meaning? We do that from the stories and beliefs of our past. We are literally machines that run on programs, and those programs are habits and beliefs that we've instilled in ourselves over time and over life. And by doing that, what then happens is we then look outside of ourselves to measure those stories and belief, and we filter for those things to be true. So we will always be self-fulfilling prophecies, because our limiting beliefs ultimately hold us back from achieving our goals. And if that limiting belief says you never achieve your goals, well, funny that, you're never going to achieve your goals. So the stories and beliefs that you tell yourself then in turn validate the meanings that you give to things. So what we have to be able to do is change the meaning of the things where we're measuring ourselves in life. We have to be able to separate meaning from self-worth. And then in turn, we then get to change the narrative of those stories and beliefs by changing the meaning of things. Now, this isn't something that's, an overnight job. Things take time. If you've been on this planet 35 years, I've been here 34, so pretty close. But that kind of time period, it's not going to happen overnight. But this is about repetition. This is about doing something consistently with momentum. It's not about the number of days or number of years, right? It's about how many times you do something. And I truly believe that if you can have, an epiphany moment, a wow moment, an inflection point. An author calls them, John O'Leary, incredible author, he calls them inflection points, like moments in time or lines in the sand. If you can have a powerful line in the sand in your life where you literally draw a line and go, no more, this is absolute bullshit, I'm moving on from this. What that then allows you to do is when you create and craft that new belief and that new story you want to tell and that new meaning you want to give to things, what that then does, when you repeat that daily in and out, whether you do it twice a day, 3 times a day, 1 time a day, 4 times a week, the results will show up as quickly as the repetition that you choose to apply. So I want you to ask yourself moving forward, what am I making this mean? Especially if something upsets you, makes you doubt yourself, makes you question your worthiness. I want you to call yourself out on that, to call yourself out and say, what am I making this mean? And really ask yourself if that's what the other person meant, or that's what the scales mean, or that's what the bank balance means. Because what we sometimes forget is that where we are today, whether it is on the scales, the bank balance, or our business, is simply a snapshot in time. It's a snapshot in a second of a moment in time of our entire life. And we have the power to change what happens next, but we will only have the power to change what happens next when we believe that we have the power. And you have to believe that you have the power. And that comes from knowing that your self-worth is completely separate from the numbers in your life, from the metrics in your life. You are born worthy. You are still worthy. No matter what's happened to you, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, you are still worthy. And when you can truly wrap your head around that and truly transform the beliefs and the stories that you're telling yourself on top of the meanings that you give things, you will change your life. You absolutely will, because you will then become a self-fulfilling prophecy for the things that you do want rather than the things that you don't want. And this is a huge part of one of my new courses. One of them is called the Build Your Belief Bundle. And we're going to work a lot in this around meanings and belief systems. We're going to work on why you're making things mean the way things they do, about rewriting and rewiring those stories, and helping you then in turn construct those beliefs that actually serve you moving forward. And that's going to be a huge part of what we cover in that 5-module course, which is launching soon at the time of recording this, mid-January 2022. So for more on my mini courses, make sure to sign up to my newsletter at lucysuperfox.com. Turn on post notifications for Lucy Superfox at Next Level Lucy on Instagram. And of course, I will share more over here on my YouTube and my podcast. But I want you to know that coming out of today's episode, that you give things meaning. You choose what things mean. That power is in your hands. And if you choose not to change the meaning of things, to then in turn change your beliefs, thoughts, habits, actions, and ultimately your life, then you also chose that too. So that was the way that I see it. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.